In this video, we'll introduce you to the automation tools that are built into TiMax SoundHub, including the system preset, cue list, and snapshots. We'll cover best practices when building your show file so that you can make the most of all the functionality we have to offer. Automation in TiMax SoundHub can be split into three features: the system preset, the cue list, and the snapshots. The system preset allows you to store all of your settings relating to the output stage of the processor. This includes your output levels, EQs, and delays. A basic cue list cue contains all pan space position information, as well as all automation that's been written on the timeline. A snapshot is the most powerful and granular option. You can use a snapshot to store and recall the state of the TiMax SoundHub crosspoint matrix. Snapshots provide granular control, allowing you to select a combination of inputs and outputs to recall. Snapshots are attached to cue list cues, so you first need to create a cue before adding a snapshot to it. Let's have a look at this in practice with our show file. You may have noticed that any time we adjust an output fader, the Store System Preset button begins flashing. When we click the button, we're presented with the Store System Preset configuration window. This text explains that the system preset will save all output levels, EQs, and delays. Unless you have a need to automate output levels and EQs, we recommend relying on the system preset to store your output parameters as a core part of the show file. The system preset can also be used to trigger the first cue in the cue list when the hardware boots up, which can be a useful feature in market sectors such as permanent installations. There are additional options that can be stored with the system preset, however these go beyond the scope of this video. For now, I'll just note that you will need to press the Store button to store any changes to the system preset. With the system preset covered, it's time to talk cues. Cues can be created, edited, and recalled from the cue list. If the cue list is not currently visible, it can be reached from this button in the main window toolbar. Let's create a new cue by clicking on this button in the cue list toolbar. A window appears with some options, but for now, let's just accept the defaults and click OK. As we now have more than one cue, we can see that the current cue is highlighted green. Clicking on a cue in the cue list lines it up with the Go button. Clicking Go recalls the cue, and it becomes the current cue. The recall scope, triggers, and other properties for the current cue can be edited by clicking the Edit Cue button. Cues can be triggered in a multitude of ways, including via a hotkey, by MIDI, and by time of day. Click this drop-down list for a full range of options. The date time function can make permanent installations a lot simpler to commission, and the hotkey function can be a lifesaver in a live environment. Should you have cast members change microphones mid-show, we can adjust channel names via the Labels tab. We can also import names via a CSV file using this item in the File menu. The Playlist tab allows us to build up a musical playlist, which can be routed out of TiMax outputs. This can be extremely useful for background music playback. Lastly, the most powerful feature within cues are snapshots. You must have recalled a cue to create or edit a snapshot, as the snapshot is attached to the cue. A snapshot can control every parameter on both input and output channels. Snapshots can also control selected matrix crosspoints, regardless of the state of the pan space. This last option can be useful when setting up monitoring on stage, but should be used with caution. We recommend being precise when setting up snapshots. Only select all inputs or outputs if you're sure that this cue must have a global effect. For now, we'll set up a snapshot that only adjusts the input EQ of channel 1. Select channel 1 on either the matrix or the pan space. Here, I'm selecting the channel on the matrix by clicking next to the input channel fader. Next, navigate back to the Edit Cue window. You'll see that the Selected Channels checkbox now has the number 1 next to it. This shows us that channel 1 is currently selected. We will check this checkbox, then make sure Input EQ is the only checkbox selected in the input channel scope. Finally, we can click the Add button to create and add the snapshot to the cue. Let's go and edit the EQ of channel 1. We can open up the EQ editor by double-clicking on the EQ thumbnail at the top of the channel strip. Now the EQ is edited, we can see that the Edit Cue button is flashing in the cue list. Clicking the button brings up the cue editor, and we can update the cue with our changes by clicking Update. Our EQ on input channel 1 has now been stored in the snapshot, and the snapshot will be recalled with the cue. We've now started to build up some basic show control elements using cues and snapshots. We'll build upon this in the next video where we discuss show control in more detail.